I'm Mike Willis with another edition of USA Wrestling's Moments Off the Mat. Today I'm joined by the team behind Wreaper Wrestling, Laura Leigh Hinojosa and Lauren Mason. How are you doing today, ladies?
Good morning. Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. A little hot in my house. There's no AC, so I'm kind of sweating a little bit. If you can see.
Oh no.
Other than that, hanging in there. So today we're talking about your company, Wreaper Wrestling. Laura Leigh, how did Wreaper Wrestling get started? Like, what are the origins behind it?
So our brand began back in March of 2018. And at that time, it was just myself and my husband, Arthur Hinojosa, doing the do. And basically, we both of us really started to get into women's wrestling. He's always been into wrestling and watching, like the NCAAs for the guys. And that really wasn't my thing, but we both started watching a lot of women's matches. In particular, that year, we really got into the World Championships. And we both were just very pulled into the sport. But, with our personal experience just as viewers and as fans, there was a lot of information that was really hard to find and to get, for watching matches and for tournaments and, accessible information about wrestlers. And that was really frustrating for us because we really wanted to keep up with the sport and, keep up with all of the events. And so we were just really inspired by these athletes and just wanting to know more and wanting to be more involved with the sport. And so that's really what spurred things for the both of us. And we were like, you know what, we're all in for this. And so, we started off with our social media on Instagram and eventually created our website, reaperwrestling.com. And it's just gone from there. It's been a crazy couple years, but it's been a big learning curve and we love what we do.
Very cool. And Lauren, when did you get tied in?
I am one of, I think, the newest member. So in March, I got a call from Laura Leigh and Arthur. And I had heard about them. I knew the face behind Wreaper Wrestling. I'd seen them at tournaments, and I knew that if I ever wanted to know, when, I don't know, just information about tournaments, I could go to Wreaper Wrestling and they would probably have what I was looking for. And so I really liked them as a company. And then when they approached me, asking if I wanted to join their co-founder team, obviously I was like, oh, I need to think about it. But obviously I was very interested. And so I just joined in, I think, March, right? I think it was March.
Right,
and,
exactly.
Yeah, so it's been a fun ride so far. So I'm still pretty new, but really loving it and super excited to see where it goes.
And Laura Leigh, what led you to invite Lauren to join your team?
So Arthur and I had kind of been running things for the past 2 years. It's just, been us two organizing, our trips and going to events and, updating our website and social media. And there's a lot of information. You're part of USA Wrestling and, just doing just like one piece or, whatever your job is, and looking at the whole sport. There's so much information about events and wrestlers, and then even just breaking it down just into the women's freestyle side of things. It's a lot to keep up with and a lot of information to put out and organize and prep and plan. And we really want this to be as accessible and as complete and accurate as we can make it for our audience and for our viewers. And so we knew at some point that we would need to bring on more people to help us, get out the information that we wanted to get to people. And so it was just kind of, and we also knew we wanted to bring on female wrestlers, to people that knew the community, people that know the sport and have been, on the tournament circuit and just kind of know the flow of things. And so currently right now, we have a five-person co-founder team. Of course, myself, Lorelei Hinojosa, Arthur Hinojosa, my husband, and then the first person that we brought on was Emma Bruntill, and the next was Diamond Guilford, and then Lauren Mason after that. And so we pride ourselves for being a female-led team, especially within women's wrestling, especially within sports media. I think it's really important to bring that perspective to the table and to have people that have, those real life experiences and the understanding of the sport to bring, a nuanced perspective and coverage for people.
So, Lauren, you're currently a wrestler on the senior level. And are you currently competing for Simon Fraser?
I am. So I am going to be going into my 5th year, hopefully. Fingers crossed, everything goes as planned. I will be going into my 5th year at Simon Fraser. And yeah, I've competed on the USA Wrestling circuit with at U20. I'm U23. I'm still young enough to be U23 athlete, and then also in the senior level as well. So it's been pretty fun to be a part of both the college scene and then the senior level as well.
It's kind of interesting and sort of a unique dichotomy to be contributing to the coverage of the sport that you're competing in. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it is definitely very weird. And I remember talking to Lorelei and Arthur about, covering tournaments that I was going to be at. And I was like, well, obviously, and they agreed, obviously my first priority is, wrestling and competing. But I also, I really love covering wrestling, and I want to do. So I want to do sports. And so to get like a little taste of it now while I'm still competing is actually really exciting. And it's pretty fun because, we go to these tournaments and we compete against each other. And then I'm like, oh, hey, by the way, can I interview you? So it's been really fun to be a part of both of them. And it's really interesting because I get to kind of see, what would I like to be asked after I was done wrestling, and like how I wouldn't like to be asked, right after I was done with the match. I would want, a little bit of time to kind of collect my thoughts and then be interviewed. So I can kind of see, I can kind of understand both the side from like the competitor and also the coverer, the interviewer. And I can kind of have a nuanced idea of what would be best for both. And so it's been really interesting to see both sides of it at the same time, actually.
Cool.
And I would like to add to that, actually, because Emma, Diamond, and Lauren are all current wrestlers, and they are all currently very active within college wrestling and the international circuit as well. And for us, it makes sense to bring on people that are current wrestlers because they kind of have the inside scoop, and they're very well connected with wrestlers that are on the scene right now. And so, someone who might not be as familiar with the women's side of things might not know all the people who, we should interview and who we should talk to, or, who's the big team right now. It's very important to have that current information and that current knowledge, and to be able to capture that in the moment. And yeah, so it was very important for us to bring on people that are current wrestlers. It does, there's you could talk about bias and making sure, interviewing someone that you've competed against before or who you will wrestle in the future. But I'll say for Emma, Diamond, and Lauren that they're all very professional, and they know how to deal with that. And like with Lauren, for example, her background is in communications, and so this is something that she is has been going to school for, and so this is good practice for her, good experience. So yeah.
So what are your and Arthur's experiences with wrestling?
So I have an interesting background in all of this. I did not wrestle growing up, but wrestling did exist in my life. I grew up in Texas, in Austin, Texas, and women's wrestling, girls wrestling has been sanctioned in Texas since 1999. I think Alaska was the first, and it followed up pretty shortly after that. And so at our high school, we had a girls wrestling team, which I always was super intrigued by. It wasn't a sport I was familiar with. My main sport was soccer, and I danced, my whole upbringing. But even when I was on the dance team at school, there were girls that were both on the dance team and on the wrestling team. And so I would hear them talk about cutting weight or needing to lose weight, to make weight, for a match or a tournament that was coming up. And they were eating a certain way, having like a certain diet that they needed to follow to make that weight. And that was, I was completely ignorant and unaware of any of that. So it just sounded strange to me. But then for Arthur, he did wrestle in high school along with his brother. We went to the same high school. And so we had a lot of crossover with our guy friends and girlfriends that were on the team. And so now, now that we're doing Wreaper, we have a lot of those people coming back that are very interested. One, that he's back into the wrestling scene, and then two, that I'm on the wrestling scene now, having been friends with people that were wrestlers, back in the day. And so, yeah, so I don't have that wrestling background, but as a fan and as a viewer, I have just become just so absorbed in the sport, and just approaching it as a female athlete. I appreciate what these women go through and what the sport brings to their lives. And, just after lots of interviews and talking with, from the young girls to the college athletes, even up to the senior level, it's very apparent that wrestling just contributes so much to who these people are. And being able to give that opportunity back to young girls is everything. So
what are the origins behind the name Wreaper Wrestling?
Well, we love the name, first of all, Wreaper Wrestling. And it was kind of like a collaboration between Arthur and I, just brainstorming of, names for the website, for social media. And we were just playing, wrestling has the WR, and that just kind of sets it apart from other sports and other words. And we were just kind of playing with different words with the WR. And I personally have an aesthetic liking to like skulls and, like the Grim Reaper, name Grim, for example. With the idea of Wreaper Wrestling, and then, what if we put the W in front of it, like wrestling, and then that way it could kind of be, the WW could be Wreaper Wrestling, could stand for women's wrestling, and it just, the more we talked about it and played with the name, the more we liked it, and it made sense. And for other people, it's really caught on. It's something people can remember, something people can relate to, especially because it is a women's wrestling sport, Wreaper Wrestling, women's wrestling.
Very cool. What was the first event that you guys went to and provided like on the ground coverage of?
I'll say when we first started, we were just going to local events. We were in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and for those who are familiar with the DFW and wrestling, it's a hotbed for girls wrestling right now in Texas in general, but really up here in Dallas, Fort Worth. And so we were just going to a lot of tournaments and local duels and matches. But our first big event was the Moval Open that fall of 2018. And we traveled up to Missouri to go to that tournament. And that was really cool to see, to finally get some experience with women's college wrestling, and to see all the teams, and kind of, being in Dallas-Fort Worth and seeing the high schoolers, you see that local talent, and it percolate up to the college level. And then, to go from these high school tournaments and seeing, that level of competition, and then to bounce to the college level and see how you know, you really see how the sport has grown, and it's evident in the numbers, it's evident in the style. You know, obviously it's freestyle in college, whereas on the high school level, it's still just folk style. Although you do see that more, you know, they go into a freestyle season, and even in Texas, like now they're practicing Greco too, which I think is really cool. So the Moval Open was our first one, and we've been back. We went back in 2019 as well, which was really cool because that was the largest women's college event that had happened, and especially considering the split that's happened from the WCWA, to see what it, you know, from our first year starting and then to get to that event in 2019 was really cool.
Yeah. So we've had a very big last couple weeks for women's wrestling. We've got emerging sports status at the Division I level. So now we have it at Division I, Division II, and Division III. And now over half the states in the country have sanctioned high school girls wrestling. I mean, it's really terrific news. There have been a lot of people working very, very hard for a very long time to, you know, help to get us to these milestones. I guess I'll kick this one over to Lauren first. Lauren, what does, you know, hearing those things mean to you?
I think it's obviously a huge deal. It's super exciting. But I think for me, you know, it affects me, but I definitely think the effect is going to be for the younger generations, because I'm almost done with college wrestling. It's not probably going to change a whole ton in a year. But it's for the younger generations, you know, for the little girls who want to who've been, I don't know, thinking about these colleges for years and years and years, because I truth be told, did not even know I didn't even know Simon Fraser was a college until probably my junior year in high school, maybe sophomore year in high school. And then I ended up going there, and I love it. It's awesome. But, you know, you have all these schools, and I'm from California, so, you know, all the typical UCLA, UC Davis, those state schools, and UC schools that are super popular. You know, that's where all my friends went, and that's what people grew up wanting to go. So for the younger generation to have that and be like, oh, I want to go to UCLA and I want to wrestle for UCLA. That's really cool. And I think that having that visibility and having those opportunities is going to increase, you know, it's just a cycle. You know, the more opportunities you have, the more women you have that create more opportunities to have more women come. And so I think it's really cool. And I think it's an awesome start, because it's definitely just getting emerging sport status doesn't really change a whole lot. It's the years to come that I think is going to make a huge difference for the younger girls, because, you know, my college career is going to be over soon, like I said, and we've been doing about like almost NCAA things for a while. So to have it really become a full-fledged thing is exciting, and then to have it for the future generations to continue to grow, I think is going to be really cool.
Thanks, Lauren. Laura Lay, do you want to weigh in on it too?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, shout out to
Having a little freezing issue.
get girls wrestling sanctioned in all these states. And then next note, it's still just mine.
Laura Lay, sorry to cut you off. You kind of there for a second, so we didn't hear who your shout out was to.
Shout out to Wrestle Like a Girl, for doing all the groundwork for getting girls wrestling sanctioned across America and all of these different states. It's kind of mind-blowing that girls wrestling is only sanctioned in half the states here in America. I feel like, you know, I just talked about Texas girls wrestling was sanctioned in 1999. I believe in Alaska it was 1987. And to go from 1987 to 2020 and only half of the states are sanctioned, especially where we are as a country and where we are with accepting women into sports and allowing girls to have the opportunity to have a career as an athlete and in sports. You know, we've seen it with soccer, with tennis, with basketball. It only makes sense to let girls, across the country have an opportunity to experience a sport like wrestling and to compete and to, maybe make a career out of it for themselves. And I think really that's having college wrestling be an emerging sport like this is just one piece of the larger puzzle of growing women's wrestling and growing girls wrestling, and then of course growing wrestling as a whole. But it's really exciting to see these opportunities open up for young girls to have more schools and more options for their continued education, girls that would like to go to college and get an education but would still like to compete in the sport that they love. Here in Texas, I think there's 3 or 4 schools that girls can choose to go to, which is great. Of course, I know there are some people that would love to travel or go out of state, to go to a school, like Lauren Mason, for example, going to Simon Fraser, wrestling out of California. But how nice is it, to have an option that's within your own state? You can go to high school, you can stay close to home, you can still get the education and everything that you want within your own state. And so to see these options pop up, and man, it's growing so fast. If you keep up with all the programs that are coming up offering women's wrestling on the college level, and so more to come. And obviously, to get that D1 championship status will be really, really cool to see. Being involved with men's NCAA championships, obviously it's a big deal, and I would love to see that on the women's side as well.
So with the growth of wrestling, I think and women's wrestling, there's been a growth of women's wrestling media. And I don't think we're like at peak women's wrestling media yet, but there are some organizations like yours that are dedicated to just covering women's wrestling. How does Wreaper Wrestling kind of differentiate itself from everybody else out there? And what do you guys have that sets you apart?
For sure. I mean, obviously the first thing is that we focus on women's freestyle. And then we also the senior level athletes, competition circuit that they all go through. And, our mission is to improve the life and visibility of athletes in women's wrestling. What's part of that is engaging with our audience. Our audience pretty much consists of young girls that are high school wrestlers or college wrestlers, and they want to be more involved with the sport. Of course, wrestling and participating in the sport is one thing, but, knowing who the top athletes are and getting on flow or getting on track, to watch a big international tournament and to know when that is and who's competing, and to rally behind, a wrestler that you're a fan of, that's a different thing than just participating in the sport. And of course, these young women want to be a part of that, but there are also fans that aren't just young female athletes. There are coaches, there are parents that maybe they wrestled in the past and still want to be engaged with the sport. And even people like myself who don't have a wrestling background, but can, come approach this sport and find meaning in it, and, see particular athletes, individual wrestlers, and rally behind those people. And so for us, it's really important to make information about these events and tournaments and individual wrestlers and teams as accessible as possible. And to really, hype is our game. we love way ahead of time and get that coverage out during the event, and then also the wrap up, at the end. But engagement, that's just huge, and using all of our platforms, whether it's our website or social media, to do that. Especially social media right now, with the younger crowd, and especially now with this quarantine, COVID-19 weirdness. And so getting information out and connecting with wrestlers and fans, through social media, that's where to be.
Can I say something to that as well?
Of course.
I think there's a ton of good, like you were saying, a ton of good women's wrestling coverage organizations. There's Wrestle Like a Girl and AWW Newsfeed and a ton more. But actually we are very diverse teams. I'm not really sure, but I'm pretty positive that we have the only team that has girls competing in the sport as well. So I think that, kind of having that inside scoop of, who should we cover and what should we cover? And we have our monthly meetings, and we talk about things as a team, and we talk about, what about this? And we all have really good ideas, and some ideas that I would have probably never thought of. So it's good to have, we represent different ages, different nationalities, everything. And we're also different areas. So, Laura, and then you have Emma, and that's usually. And so I think it's really good we have a little bit of information on a lot of different people and we have relationships with different people. That's also something that has been really cool is women's wrestling is definitely a big friend group, you could say, because, we're competitors on the mat, but off the mat, we're friends. And so it's cool to go over and talk to one of your friends and say, hey, what do you think about A, B, or C? So it's cool. We have our own opinion, but we can also ask our friends who are the women who we are trying to cater to, what their opinion is on things we should do and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Thanks for the insight, Lauren. So from where you guys started to where you are now, what do you think the biggest differences or the biggest changes Wreaper Wrestling has undergone?
Definitely the scope of what we focus on within our brand. That first year for us, we were really just trying to find our place within women's wrestling and trying to figure out what we could contribute. We knew we wanted to contribute to the growth of the sport and this wave of popularity that girls wrestling is experiencing. And so that first year for us was really just trying to dip our feet into it, really just jumping into the water of the whole thing and figuring out what we could contribute and what we could offer to the sport. And so finding our footing in covering, the senior level and really pumping up those world team members and national team members and the international tournament circuit. That's, we found our focus, and that's something that we're going to continue with into the future. And now that we have, a team, an actual established co-founder team, we can expand that scope now. First we were just really focusing on getting just basic information out about events and really just keeping up year round with the different events that were coming up. But now we can focus on, we can create videos, we can do different activities or, focus on different ways that we can highlight female wrestlers, in a more creative way and not just focus on just the events and the travel. So really we're just looking to increase our scope and have more projects that we're working on that we can put out there, across our social media, onto our website. And Lauren can even attribute to this. We really want to get more content out on YouTube and create some videos. And I can let her talk about a project that she's working on that we're excited to put out.
So first off, we had that Best of All Time series, and I think that was a super good, engaging bracket tournament because it got fans, talking, and it was just a fun little hypothetical. What if Christy Davis wrestled Adeline Gray? Things that probably would never happen, but matches that could happen, with Forrest and Tamara. So it was really cool to be able to be a part of highlighting these women who are the best of all time. And piggybacking off of that, we are working on a series. It's going to be called the Legacy series, and it is a video series focusing on women who deserve to have their stories told because they are legacy. So people like Christy Davis and, you know, teams that have won multiple WCWA titles, or Olympic teams that have been, you know, killer in their time. So it's going to be a series of videos where we highlight women or teams who we think their story needs to be told, because in the men's wrestling world, you have these legends. You know, there's Dan Gable and Terry and all of these people who everyone knows, and a lot of people know their stories. And Flo has done a really good job, and a lot of organizations have done a good job of highlighting those men so that people know them. And, you know, the more stories you have, the more people you're like, oh, that's cool, I want to do that. And so I think it's going to be really important for the women's wrestling, you know, participation and growing wrestling as a whole, to have these stories about these women who are super cool, and they've done some amazing things and overcome some awesome obstacles, and you know, won 5 world championships or whatever they've done. And so to have their stories told, I think is going to be really important. And so that's one of our newest series. So we're actually going to be posting later this week. So that'll be very, very exciting.
That is exciting. Am I allowed to ask who's the first one that's going up?
You are. So the first one we have is Danielle Lappage. She's actually a Canadian 2-time Olympian. And then, so she is the one we're going to be posting. And then the second one is actually Christy Davis. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Well, definitely fits the bill for what you're going for. That's exciting. And definitely something that I think all wrestling fans should be able to enjoy. So very cool to hear you guys doing that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, thanks for your time, ladies. I'm glad we were able to talk a little bit about Wreaper and hopefully get the word out about some of the cool stuff that you're looking to do going forward. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we log off here?
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity, you know, taking the time to talk with us and focus on women's wrestling and, you know, female in sports media. I think it's really important to highlight that and to let the community see that we're here doing the work and trying to grow the sport from our side of things. Please go to our website, reaperwrestling.com. Of course, we have our social media, Instagram, Wreaper Wrestling. I think on Facebook it's Wreaper Wrestling, Twitter @Fear the Reaper. If you want to support women's wrestling, you want to support Wreaper and our brand, we have merchandise available on our website. You can go buy a shirt, go buy a decal. You know, we would love, well, once events are back on deck and there are events to go to, you know, our goal is really just to try and get out to as many USA Wrestling events and to be on the ground to cover those things. And, you know, buying a shirt, buying a decal, that helps us get there. But yeah, thank you so much. And we're super excited to see where the growth goes, and Wreaper Wrestling is here to stay. And again, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much.